Welcome to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. My very special guest today is Kenny Mammarella-D-Cruz, also known as the Man Whisperer. Kenny helps men face life's big questions, such as identity, purpose, and what comes next, drawing on his own powerful journey, which he'll talk to us about, and decades of experience guiding people through their midlife change. So welcome, Kenny.
Firstly, it's great to be here. Secondly, I feel a bit sheepish. It's like, am I allowed to be a grown-up, leave alone a midlife man? It's ridiculous. Can't believe I'm 60. Inside, I'm 34 and a half.
I think it's crept up on all of us, hasn't it? I don't quite know how it's happened, but anyway, we'll for the next kind of 45 minutes, we will pretend that we're grown up and we're middle-aged men. I know that you had quite a extreme start to life growing up. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that and, how that went on to, shape you over time.
Yeah. Well, I guess looking back now and flaunting it shamelessly, it was extreme. But on the other hand, for me, it was my normal. And my normal, I was born into a nice Goan Catholic family in Uganda. So very much into going to church and being good. It was very matriarchal. I'm the eldest of two. I have a younger brother. So as the eldest, I was chosen to be the golden boy. My grandparents lived with us, and the golden boy is generally elevated to glory, which cost me my life, because I was literally responsible for the emotions of my mother, more my godmother, but it kind of felt like womankind. And womankind were quite unkind about the way they felt about the men. So first and foremost, don't be like the men. Secondly, whatever it is that harms them, hurts them, concerns them, causes them pain, fix it. Don't be like the men and save them from their negative emotions. And thirdly, and I guess the biggest curse of all, was under no circumstances should I experience what I now term as toxic femininity, which is if they withdraw or criticize or in any way shame or even frown at me, then I have done something wrong. And for them to withdraw or criticize would be devastating for me, because to be given a status like that, it's a big status to have to maintain, because it just hurt too much. And I would say men and probably boys all our lives, it's the fear of abandonment and the fear of humiliation that I would say ran me and runs a lot of men.
That's a very complex set of requirements to impose on a young boy.
And I'd say very normal, very, very normal. So many men, especially empathetic men, had to learn the female ways. And in a lot of households, it was the woman and the woman's family who would raise the family. And it would be matriarchal. And mine certainly was. And I would say same for the men. They didn't want to be criticized. They didn't want to be abandoned. And, I think this probably rules the world, fear of abandonment and humiliation and being withdrawn from, at least with toxic. And I'm not saying toxic masculinity or toxic femininity are good, but so many men have said to me, at least with toxic masculinity, it's spoken out or it's shouted out or there's a telling off and we know where we stand and it can pass. Where with the silent second guessing, am I safe? What's going on? It's a very different story. It's a mind's game and it's a minefield. And I'd say another big difference between male and female is we have testosterone. It's like short attention span here and now. Where with the feminine and the way that I was for certainly at least the first half of my life is I had a very expansive mind. and I could spin all the plates of where is everyone, how is everyone, what's going on, who do I need to check in on, blah, blah, blah. And it was a very feminine way. And I was one of the feminine people who felt pain if someone, especially a male, because of the testosterone, didn't think of us. And that was taken as abandoning. And then as I changed and grew into myself and undid the mummy's boy and became my own man, my brain rewired, and I became one of those men with, if you're in front of me, then you matter the most. I love you the most because you are here. And whatever is not in front of me right now does not exist. And thinking about it now, that's being present, where through most of my childhood, I was more second guessing what might happen, looking for trouble, trying to fix my fears and fantasies of whatever might come in order to survive. So there's peace in the household and I feel safe. And I guess moving on from my story, it went from there, and I'll leap into my father was working, he was the head of the parcel department in the Uganda post office. Idi Amin was around, and he did things like smuggle out a couple of manuscripts, save people who were being beaten to a pulp near death, and go into a place, I don't remember what it's called now, but there was a place in the jungle where people were taken, and they never came out alive. And he actually went into this, death zone place and said, these people that you're holding, it's not government business, it's post office business. So let us take them and take care of them. So obviously his name went higher and higher up the death list. We had death threats. Our phones were tapped. We were followed on the street. I remember we had toy walkie-talkies, and my aunt and uncle, my godmother, would be in one car, we'd be in another car, and the conversation would be, should we turn right here or left here? We heard gunfire that way, but there are often ambushes and things there. Who's following us and what do we do? And we were just like a normal, simple family who just suddenly we're doing this. And my brother and I had to hide our toy guns because, people could easily be shot. The soldiers were generally high on drugs and they had the right to do things. And there were a lot of rapes and tortures and beatings and curfew, and it was very, very unsafe. So with all of that, it was suddenly our lives are threatened and we need to somehow stay alive. And eventually leave because, I remember very clearly the phone call and at nighttime it was, we're going to come and kill you tonight. And my father initially took it as a joke, and they phoned back and they said, no, we're serious. My father said, in Swahili, we've got 3 lions, Simbas, and they'll eat you. We had Alsatian dogs. They were our guard dogs. Most people had dogs. They had the decency to phone back and make sure that they knew that we knew they were going to come and kill us that night. And that's when we went into hiding. And I remember another very clear scene the day before we left Uganda, when we were in hiding in my aunts and uncles. And my father said to me, you may never see me again. You're the head of the family. Take care of your mother and brother. That was at the age of 7. So these things shaped my life. Bango's childhood, not only on duty to please the women and not be abandoned by the women, but now little boy man needs to somehow save the family. And we ended up in refugee camp. As Goans, we don't know the Indian languages or cultures or whatever. And we had a lot of racism there. How am I supposed to protect the family? So it was a busy childhood.
So how does one cope with that amount of trauma, on not just on the kind of the physical level, emotional level, but also, as you were explaining a bit earlier on, the expectations on you and expectations on you to try and understand everything that's required of you. I mean, that's an awful lot for a child to try and make sense of. I mean, were you in survival mode? And it took quite a long time before you were even in a place where you could start to unravel it and understand it.
didn't have the luxury of unraveling, understanding anything. It was pure survival. And it was taking care of my mother and my brother and somehow surviving. Everything was internalized. And that's, I guess, where the obsessive compulsive disorder started, as well as the Tourette's. I'd twitch, I'd grunt. I think is it derma something or other, picking skin. And then the trichomania, pulling my hair. And the Tourette's, I guess, was twitching. And so it went on. And the one that showed was the twitching. And it was embarrassing. And it's like, I shouldn't do it. I was still supposed to be the perfect little prince, impeccable behavior. And I just got on with it. And I guess in a way, my mother and I became the couple. My brother became our child. And, you know, we had very privileged lifestyles. We'd never really learned to cook or clean or buy things or anything. So we had to start from scratch. And we moved from refugee camp to a different refugee camp when my father came into the country. He was smuggled out at the last minute, so he survived. And I remember having a phone call. My mother was called to the phone, and it was him in Italy. He was smuggled to Italy because they were waiting to pick him up, expecting him to go to Kenya, which is what he told everyone, and he had a Kenyan passport. But he was working with the United Nations, and the Red Cross kept us together. They got rid of his papers. He was stateless, from enemy of the state to stateless. And then it's like, what on earth are you doing in Italy? We were supposed to move to Kenya and carry on from there because, you know, that was our life. And I guess the chaos continued from there. He came into the UK. We moved to his refugee camp, and we chose to move. Well, a house came up. My father actually helped to run 3 refugee camps in Italy and organized, I guess, a representative from each of the Indian, what would you call them, tribes or whatever, the different religions and cultures and languages. You got one from each. The common language was Swahili. And he organized, for example, a hunger strike, because the people who were taking care of the refugee camp cut the rations, cut the tobacco, pocketed the money. And, you know, there wasn't a solidarity until they kind of went in Swahili, oi, oi, enough of that. We're not going to eat until you play ball.
So you got eventually to the UK then. Did you feel at that point you could, you know, relax is the wrong word, but perhaps stop running and start to, you know, work things out?
That's what I would have loved to have happened. Father's back. I can step down. What actually happened was we moved to a small town in Wales, Catholic community. And I had to step it up because my father wasn't right after what he'd been through. And I guess I didn't trust him. I couldn't trust anyone. I couldn't abandon my post in a way. So I carried on taking care. He did his best. My mother did his best, and we all tried to give my I almost said my son, my brother, normality. And that's when the PTSD, kind of OCD, etc., got much, much, much worse. And that's when I started thinking, you know, we are poor. If I kill myself, then maybe they'll have one less mouth to feed and they'll have a better chance. So I wasn't quite thinking straight. And we were in chaos and trauma, and not able to talk about things, because if one cracked, maybe we'd all crack. Or maybe it just wasn't right for us to talk for whatever reason. But no, it was time to go to school, time to be normal, time to pass tests and exams. And we just kind of fumbled through it all. Luckily, in a wonderful community of caring, sharing people who accepted us and taught us. You know, our next door neighbor redecorated our whole house for us because they didn't want us to move further down the street. So we just belonged and we all survived. That's got nothing to do with living. But thank God we were alive. And I remember sometimes sitting in the lounge, watching TV and counting us and thinking, were there 4 of us? Were there 5? Did one die? Did we all survive? It was really weird, quite surreal. I remember in the middle of the night, putting my finger under the noses of my father, mother, and brother and checking that they're alive. And it was just crazy times. I
was going to say, so you're constantly living in this kind of hyper awareness state, never able to really relax. And I guess you're still the head of the family, because you're still doing the job of the father, of the main role in the family. How long does this last? I mean, is there a point where your life then starts to change? Perhaps at the end of your schooling. When was the next kind of shift?
The role and the survival and the fawning, being nice so everyone else is nice. There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. It continued until I realized that I was still in my late 20s, a little boy pretending to be a man who people liked and respected, but I just simply didn't exist in my life. I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't have a sense of self. Didn't exist. It was a life of survival. And also, I didn't want to be OCDing secretly and having all of these crazy thoughts and need to control. And, I had one job where I moved to London. Very good job. But I remember going into the managing director's office and saying to him, this time I'm late at work because, the bus was stuck on England's Lane. This is in London for absolutely ages and no one knew why. And then finally someone went to the front of the traffic jam and they found a man dead at the wheel and he had a heart attack and he died. And that's why I'm late for work. What I couldn't say is I washed and put everything in order and a hair from my arm touched the tile and I had to redo the whole ritual. And that's why I was late, because of my obsessive compulsive disorder. So I became self-employed because I was unemployable and I just didn't want to carry on lying. And, it was a huge, wonderful career in publishing in front of me. I needed to unlearn these things. And I guess that's when I learned to breathe. I didn't breathe because I was trying to be invisible. And I've met so many men who say, as boys, even as men, they didn't breathe as boys because they didn't want to be found and beaten, or they didn't want to be seen by an alcoholic parent and abused, or because they didn't want the bully to see them, so they went invisible, or whatever it was. And it's very male to want to fix things. And when we think and ruminate and try and fix the fears and fantasies, or even fix the realities, there's no breathing and there's panic. And my life was panic. And I realized that my mind was always looking for trouble and recreating trouble to fix. And my body was addicted to adrenaline. If I wasn't in fear and pretending that I knew why I was in fear, making up a story about it, then something really bad would happen. It wasn't safe to be safe.
So that was your normal. That was almost oddly was your happy, because that was where you felt comfortable.
And I find the same with so many men that I speak with, is their normal is fear and survival. And the protector's job, and we all have different parts. The inner protector's job is for that person to survive, not live or love or thrive or anything dangerous and out of control like that, but to survive. And I'd say the core of my work is to get people out of surviving and into living safely, not stupidly, safely.
And how did you go about this? Did you kind of undergo this yourself and, through your own means, or did you seek help from someone to kind of help move on, from the situation that you were in? Because it sounds like you were, desperate, but that was the norm. And, ordinarily I would have thought it was quite difficult to be able to take yourself out of that and find a way forward.
Totally. And I still hadn't really talked about my childhood, my life, what was going on in my head. The only thing, people could see the obsessive compulsive tendencies, and the twitching was on and off here and there. And I was used to being poor, didn't know what help might be available. And therapy was surely for Hollywood film stars and people like that. I didn't realize that I had these things with labels. It was just me being weird, wrong, bad, and stupid. And the body dysmorphia was huge as well. So I made up this thing to break my thinking addiction. And the initial thing that I made up was, once I allowed myself to admit that I had never fixed anything or worked anything out with my mind, not once, apart from maybe crossing the road and frying an egg, then I could stop. So I agreed with myself that what I'd do is, as soon as I'd find myself lost in space and not breathing, in fear, in fantasy, and not present and available to life and available to love and available to anything, as soon as I found myself lost in the space between my ears, in that split second, I'd take a deep breath in and I'd think, thank you for reminding me who I used to be. What I didn't realize is I was actually thanking my inner protector, who owned and controlled my life and lived in my head, for saving my life, because that was done. So thank you for reminding me who I used to be. Who I used to be was owned by the fear and overthinking. And as I gave gratitude and I put it in the past with used to be, as I breathed out, I just engage with whoever and whatever was in front of me. So I needed to break the addiction to thinking and get here and now. And then I expanded that, because it's like, okay, that's all well and good, but in daily life, I just need to be here and I need to be breathing. So I started playing games initially with my own body, that if I coughed, sneezed, itched, burped, gurgled, coughed, farted, whatever my body did, that would be my body reminding me to breathe and get here. It's the fart of presence.
That's surely a book title.
And then I extended that to my environment. So every time I walked through a doorway, and then every time I saw a doorway, or every time I opened a window, and then every time I heard a bird or a child or a car horn, every time I saw a bald man or a blonde woman or a red car or anything red. So I'd play games to get here and to be available. And as I did that, my life transformed, because I learned to be calm. And if I wasn't calm and present and coming from love rather than fear, and this became the norm. And if I wasn't, I'd adjust back here, because here is where life is. Here is where love is. And here is where life brought me the most incredible opportunities and coincidences and people and signs and temptations, and traveling the world, working with Mother Teresa with dying people, which is where I got over the obsessive compulsive disorder. coincidences that led me to living in Fiji and living in Sydney and starting groups and just meeting wonderful people and incredible things happening in my life. It's like my life being led by life and responding into a bigger, better life rather than reacting to everything with fear and Groundhog Day. So to be able to move into life as the man in me holding my inner child safe, rather than owned by my protector, keeping my child in the limbo of fear and survival.
So you really started to live then once you've been through the transition and explore the world, I guess, as you said, and have all these experiences.
And the good news is it wasn't me doing and manifesting a different personality that people have to buy and I have to buy, just another fraud person. But it was unlearning and undoing, so there's space for who I am to show up to the world and life to show up to me. And then responding into bigger life way over Groundhog Day. And I found that as the man in me is present, the child in me is safe. That's where love, and you could call it natural or spiritual or cosmic or whatever it is, guidance, the magic of life, Harry Potter or whatever it is, can show up and I can respond into it step by step.
So you did this for yourself, and how did you then morph into thinking, well, if I've helped myself, I can help other people who feel locked or limited by their history? How did that transition into you becoming, I know the man whisperer? How did that transition into helping other men, essentially?
Absolute fluke and accident. The whole man whisperer thing came because Newsweek wrote a chapter in the book about me working with men and mental health and whatever, and they called me the man whisperer. But I went from working for newspapers and publishing into design and marketing and publicity, launching a lot of businesses for people. And I noticed that the people who happened to talk about their lives and what was up, their businesses just kind of did very well quite quickly. Sometimes before the publicity even went out, something went out that brought success. And then I later realized that they were present in their lives and in alignment with themselves for the magic to happen, whatever it was. So if I noticed that in business, and I didn't know what therapy was or anything, I was just hanging out with people and we were just talking about life and what was going on, and things seemed to get in order. Then I kind of thought, well, that's interesting. Let's see. So I was, launching all these businesses, and I was doing world tours with major pop stars, James Brown type thing. And on the quiet or subsidized by me was giving help to the authors and people who were doing things around natural health, self-awareness. Now it's all the rage. In the old days, no one was interested. We're talking about the late 80s, maybe moving into the early 90s. No one was interested. But it was here. It was around. It was very valuable. It spoke my language, and I was promoting a lot of people who were now, some of them quite well-known teachers. As other people started doing this, I just thought, I don't need to do this. And I kind of got to a stage in my life where literally all my dreams came true. I had a kind of minor pop star girlfriend who I was supposed to get married to and get fat and rich and grow my business and whatever. And I just thought, I was at 29, I think, and it was, my first Saturn return. Saturn return is every 29 years, where there's often a big change in life. And it was, okay, I have everything, I love everything, but I lack sunshine. And I moved here. We had British passports, but I moved here literally as a refugee. I need to check things out to make sure that I am somewhere through choice. I'm living my life consciously rather than falling into the default. And so many people around me were on the conveyor belt of, their education and uni, and then they become bankers or whatever it is, lawyers, and then they retire and then they have it's just like, I don't want to be my life. So I followed, I followed literally. I realized it was time to move on. Through coincidence, my grandmother died, and my family went out of the country to the Canaries for Christmas and New Year. Came back, and the warehouse I was living in was burgled. And as I was away, I was very clear it was time to move on. And the burglary was, oh my God, they've taken everything. Now I'm poor and I'm stuffed. On the other hand, it's like, oh, what a relief. I'm allowed to go. It's a side. Life's on my side. And then a day or so later, my girlfriend actually renewed my insurance. I thought I wasn't even insured. So I thought, right, I'm going to leave. I think it was the 29th of October, which gives me enough time to deal with my staff, my clients and everything, and go. So I did. I moved to Fiji, and this is where all the adventures started, where I remember feeling it's like wherever I need to be, whatever I need to do, I followed life. And when I came back to the UK 5 years later, and it was only supposed to be for 2 years before moving to Sydney, my friends, my closest friends, became idiots. I missed them so much when I was away, but they were distracted by money, power, sex, love addiction, drink, drugs, overwork, whatever it was, muscles, nonsense. And it's like, idiots. I came back for you and you're not even here. So I got about, I think it was 16, maybe 18 in my lounge in Moswell Hill. They were a bit scared of each other because they're from different classes and they hadn't met each other. But I basically said, I don't know what a men's group is, but I'm starting one now because I need to be met at depth. You're all in it. And I'll still come raving and stuff, but it's not enough. And that's where it all started with the groups. And then it just grew and grew, and people found out, and I had to take it out of my home. That was 25 years ago. I started holding groups 28 years ago when I lived in Sydney. And it was literally following life. Since then, we've been holding groups every day since lockdown online. I train people to hold groups. I've got the only accredited training. I see a lot of clients. I've moved back to Wales. Now I'm 60. I moved back to Wales during my second Saturn return 3 years ago. So the first one I moved away. The second one I moved back. And I just share whatever tools that I have with people so they can be free and live with passion, with purpose, with personal power, able to empower others. And it's like, following hearts rather than Groundhog Day with the fears.
So, and do you often think of the little boy in Uganda? I know you said initially every time you had a bodily action, you thought of them. I mean, I guess from where you started life to where you are, that's a massive shift.
About 3 years ago, I bought him the Batmobile that I had to leave in Africa, with the back wheels turn and the fire goes in and out. And there's Batman and Robin, and there's a cutter. You press a button and it cuts chains. It's just the coolest toy. But he is safe inside of me, and he leads the way and attracts love and goodness and opportunities. Yesterday, I agreed to give a talk to, I think it's 200-300 new pupils in a boarding school. And I know that it's going to be him being held safe by the man in me, meeting them where they are. And my protector is going to be by my side, guiding me. Watch out for this, watch out for that. But it's because of him that I can follow my heart. It's because of him that I can keep myself in alignment. And because I'm present and connected here and now, he's safe and everything can happen. And I can do scary things like go on radio every fortnight. I'm on the what's it called, Times Radio, and it's live, and it's scary. But if I show up with love, the magic will always happen. And I just need to show up. I don't need to show off anymore. I don't need to be invisible or have any answers, because it's like, as far as I'm concerned, and this is one of the things about the groups, we're in it together. And with my private clients, I get them to meet their inner protector, their inner DJ, their inner critic, their inner free person who's going to lead the way, the man emerging from them. So everything that I have learnt, everything that's helped me turn it around, I share. And it's just like, I get better company.
So for men listening to this who perhaps didn't have the extreme experience that you had growing up, but have, trauma in their childhood growing up and are trying to address that, perhaps I don't know how, I guess what you're saying then is, you're not looking to dispose of that boy that you were, that experienced all of the trauma, but you're just learning to, keep them inside, but keep them protected. But, how would you, someone listening to this, how do they go about doing that? And I know that's a very large question.
No, I think it's a really good question. And for me, the simpler, the better. And just to say, I happen to have a glamorous story. It would be exactly the same if, one man's sword wound is another man's paper cut. It's not about how glamorous is the story. It's about the effects that it had on that person and that person's relationship to it. And, I didn't grow up in an alcoholic family, or with someone very ill, or with a tragic death, or with violence, or, it could have been so much worse or better, but it's about our relationship to it. And for me, the thing is to adjust and come from here and now. The presence, acceptance is the thing that I feel will set me and everyone free. Accept what is. And then changing the relationship, because, I could blame my father, the Catholic Church, Idi Amin, whoever I want. But I'm not going to say, until they say they're sorry, I'm not going to move on. It's like, I can choose safely when to move on. And there is only one moment, and that moment is now. And it's up to me to choose how I use this moment. And there's nothing wrong. There's everything right with being angry and being sad and being jealous and whatever. And it's for me to notice that, to allow that, rather than suppress my feelings. So don't push everything away. Don't push anything away. Include it because it is. And it's like a graphic equalizer. You can turn the volume up and down. As long as you're in the center, the man in you is in the center right here and right now, then you have absolute choice on how to relate to everything and everyone and take part in the world and make it safe. The groups are on every day and they're free for a month, and then 20 or 30 quid for unlimited groups every day. That's good company on tap to be experimenting with who you are, and no longer needing to be in a survival mode or a survival personality. So, yeah, playtime, time to show up.
And how does it work in a kind of collaborative environment, especially if you're trying to get to grips with who you are and your past? I think a lot of men are frightened or uneasy about sharing or opening up about how they're feeling. What would be your advice to them who might necessarily not shy away from this sort of this sort of help?
Well, I would like everyone, whether you ever come to a group or not, to read the ground rules that we've got. One of the ground rules, there is experiment with who you are. There is confidentiality. There is also pass. No one has to say or do a thing. It's not, you have to do what everyone else is doing. There's peer pressure. there isn't anything to keep up with. So in life, it's fine to be still. It's fine to say no. Those are boundaries. Boundaries, and this is something that took me a long time to learn. Boundaries are a very intimate place where people know where they stand. And once people have met at boundaries, then the boundaries can change. We didn't have boundaries. We had abandonment, passive aggression, acting that everything's fine and everything's cool and, being nice. That's not boundaries. It's not intimate. But it is about your own boundaries, and don't push yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be gentle with yourself. So they are, for me, rules for life, where I exist in the center of my life and I have boundaries so I can meet life. And I would say the difference, as far as I'm concerned, between a man and a boy, irrespective of age, this is all about stage, is a man can love, where boys can often just fear. A man can collaborate, where boys often need to compete and maintain their position in the pecking order. A man can breathe and be, where a boy is very often not breathing and doing and doing and doing and performing or making a noise. And boys make a noise. It's not wrong, but a man can listen as well. Listen and respond rather than just react. So a man includes the feminine side, where boys need to prove their masculinity. And I know in me the toxic masculine as well as the toxic feminine. And I also know the loving masculine and the loving feminine. And I'm willing to take them all and move forward and adjust in the moment rather than second guess and control the future. Because Groundhog Day, maybe that's for groundhogs. I don't know. Is there such an animal as a groundhog, or is it just a movie?
I think there is actually. Yes, it's probably something quite dull and boring in the UK, but I think they've got some sort of rodent. Let me just ask one more question, Kenny, if I may. Then, do you think we're winning? Is there a cultural shift, do you think, towards openness and men coming to terms, I guess, with how to be a man? Especially, there's a lot of talk, and you've mentioned it, about toxic masculinity, about, where do men fit in? What's their role? Do you think we're getting the answers, or, are we shifting to a point where, we're going to find more of an equilibrium, or do you think there's still quite a lot of work to do?
I would say as individuals, we will always have quite a lot of work to undo what's no longer true and who we no longer need to be, so we can be our own authentic man. And I would say there's a lot of noise in the media. Everyone's selling, this is how to be a man. This is how not to be a man. This is what you need to buy. This is what you need to look like. This is what you need to know. This is what you need to believe. This is who you need to have on your arm. This is the house and the car and the nonsense. And that's all be a different type of fraud, to bully other people and feel better about yourself. So many of the men that I work with actually have had all of those things ticked off their lists: fame and fortune, money and muscles, the babe, whatever. And at the end of it, they're even more depressed, because it's like, well, why aren't I happy? I've ticked it all off the list. I've followed the instruction manual. And the bottom line is, well, if you don't exist in your own life, then why bother? So it's undo and find the man in you, rather than another game, another act, another survival personality, another fraud. And the man in you, I would say, needs to be grounded in the here and now, rather than in the air, or what do they call it? Spiritual bypassing or blaming, shaming, working out. It's like right here and right now, so life can meet you. And maybe the man in you is very, very feminine, or very, very angry, or not quite sure about anything. Good. Breathe it in. experience it, and let it pass and let it change and grow. It's a journey. There isn't a once blah, 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 then I'll be okay. There is only right here and right now.
That's a perfect place, I think, to finish our discussion. But I just thank you, Kenny. That's been fascinating. Thank you for being very open and sharing your story as well.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Midlife Men podcast with me, Philip Briscoe. If you want to find out more about Kenny and all the different ways that he works with men, visit his website, themanwhisperer.co.uk. To help raise profile of this podcast, it'd really help if you could leave a rating or review. And please do promote it to your own networks so it expands the reach of these stories. Finally, there's now a book called Men Speak Up, Journeys Through Mental Health, which is based on the podcast and available on Amazon and on other online retailers.